Keanu Reeves steps into an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of the city, dressed in casual, slightly rumpled clothes, as though he had just come from a typical day. Choosing a quiet, inconspicuous table, he seems intent on blending in, even as the shimmer of crystal chandeliers casts a glow across the room. Before he even gets the chance to glance at the menu, a waitress approaches, her expression brimming with disdain, her posture rigid with arrogance. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she asks sharply, her voice dripping with sarcasm and pitched just loud enough to catch the attention of nearby diners. What happens next stuns everyone present, unraveling a truth that no one could have anticipated. But before we continue, let us know where you're tuning in from. If stories like this capture your attention, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we've got another remarkable story waiting for you. The Lumiere restaurant was an icon of elegance in Beverly Hills. Perched on one of the city's most glamorous streets, its expansive windows offered glimpses of neon-lit avenues where luxury cars crawled past in a parade of affluence. Inside, every detail was meticulously curated to exude sophistication. Lumiere wasn't merely a place to eat. It was a hotspot for those who wanted to make a statement. Hannah, one of Lumiere's senior waitresses, navigated the dining room with practiced ease, her polished demeanor punctuated by a professional smile. Her neatly styled bun and impeccably tailored uniform underscored her air of efficiency and control. For Hannah, working at Lumiere wasn't just a job. It was a badge of honor, at least that's how she saw it. Being part of one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious establishments was something she never hesitated to boast about. Yet Hannah had a tendency to let her pride tip into arrogance. She had an uncanny knack for making snap judgments about guests, sorting them into mental categories based on their attire, mannerisms, and overall presentation. "Some people just don't belong here," she often thought to herself. The restaurant's glass door opened smoothly, and a man stepped inside. He wore faded jeans, a plain shirt, and a jacket that looked comfortable but bore no trace of luxury branding. He moved with quiet confidence, his presence almost imperceptible as he calmly approached the reception desk. Keanu Reeves wasn't one to flaunt his wealth, even though he was one of the most recognizable names in Hollywood. His understated manner was a stark contrast to the ostentatious glamour of Beverly Hills. At this moment, he looked like just another ordinary customer. Hannah was stationed at the reception, engrossed in a conversation with another staff member about a VIP reservation. When Keanu caught her eye, she instantly fell silent. Her gaze sharpened, appraising him with barely veiled contempt. He didn't resemble the kind of person who typically frequented Lumiere. Letting her reaction show, she tilted her head, giving him a deliberate once-over. Her eyes lingered on his worn-out boots before she forced a stiff smile, which disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "Good evening," she greeted flatly. "How can I assist you?" "I'd like a table, please," Keanu replied, his tone even and polite. Her brow arched as if he'd just said something ridiculous, her expression practically screaming, "Are you serious?" Crossing her arms, she dropped her smile altogether. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a very exclusive restaurant." Keanu's calm demeanor didn't falter. "Yes, I'm sure," he said simply. Hannah let out a short, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head slightly. "All right, give me a moment," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. She turned sharply and headed to the reception desk, her movements brisk and annoyed. Once there, she pulled up the reservation system, typing his name with exaggerated flourish. When no results appeared, she rolled her eyes and returned to the dining room, visibly annoyed. "Just as I thought," she said with a sarcastic edge. "You don't have a reservation," She gave a curt sigh, then added, "We do have a few open tables, but just so you know, this isn't your typical dining spot." Unruffled, Keanu gave a faint smile. "I understand. I'd still like to dine here." Her exasperation was impossible to miss. With an overly dramatic sigh, she snatched a menu from the host stand. "Fine," she said sharply. "Follow me." Hannah strode through the dining area without glancing back, her pace hurried and mechanical. Instead of seating him in the center, where the golden glow of the chandeliers highlighted the restaurant's opulent atmosphere, she led him to the furthest, darkest corner. The table was tucked near the kitchen, where the clatter of dishes and muted conversations from the staff created a stark contrast to the rest of the elegant dining room. She dropped the menu onto the table with an audible thud. "Here you go," she said, her voice laced with false sweetness. "This table should work for you. It's a little more private." Keanu's faint smile didn't waver as he glanced at the table, then back at her. "Thank you," he said evenly. Hannah muttered under her breath as she walked away, just loud enough for a nearby couple to catch. "Bet he's gone the second he looks at the menu." Across the dining room, Keanu opened the menu, scanning the options at a leisurely pace. The soft hum of live music carried through the space, yet his serene posture seemed unshakable. From her vantage point, Hannah watched with a smug grin, convinced he'd be asking for the check within minutes. She folds her arms and squints at him, as if debating whether he's being sarcastic or just clueless. "You're welcome," she says, her tone laced with biting sarcasm. "Just so you know, these tables are typically reserved for special occasions, but since we're not booked tonight, you can have it." With a sharp pivot, she walks off before he can respond. When Hannah comes back to take his order, her attitude turns even nastier. She pulls out her notepad with an exaggerated flourish and throws a frosty glance his way. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asks, her voice thick with disinterest. "Or do you need a recommendation?" Keanu calmly looks at the menu and gestures toward one of the priciest entrees. "I'd like to try this one," he says. Hannah barely hides her amusement, covering her mouth as if to suppress a laugh. "Ah, the filet de bœuf Rossini," she replies in a patronizing tone. "A classic choice. Just to be clear, sir, you're aware this dish is $350, right?" Keanu nods without breaking his calm. "Yes, it sounds delightful." Her head tilts slightly, and a cruel smile creeps across her lips. "Well then," she says with mock sweetness, "just to avoid any misunderstandings later, I suggest double-checking the prices. We wouldn't want any surprises now, would we?" Keanu's steady composure seems to unsettle her even more. "I'm sure," he responds evenly. Hannah heaves a dramatic sigh, scribbling down the order as if it's a huge inconvenience. "Fine, if that's what you want. But just so you know, our chef expects diners to truly appreciate dishes like this. I hope it lives up to your standards." She spins on her heel again, but pauses before leaving. "Oh, and one more thing," she adds with a sharp edge to her voice. "The minimum tip here is 20%. Just something to keep in mind while you enjoy." As she walks off, Keanu seems completely unbothered by her attempts to rattle him. He glances around the dining room, admiring the elegant decor and the pianist's soothing melody. When the appetizer arrives, Hannah sets it down with a hard thud, causing the plate to skid slightly across the table. "Here's your appetizer," she says with a mocking smile. "Hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating." Keanu nods politely. "Thank you." Hannah leans in slightly, her tone dripping with provocation. "You know, a lot of people who order this end up not liking it. It's not exactly your typical dish, but I'm sure you'll manage. Good luck." Keanu meets her gaze with his usual calm demeanor. "It looks wonderful. Thank you for your thoughtfulness." Frustrated by her failure to provoke him, Hannah storms off, muttering under her breath to a co-worker, "That guy won't even make it to the main course. He'll bail as soon as he sees the check." Meanwhile, Keanu continues enjoying his appetizer, completely unfazed. From across the dining room, Hannah stood with her arms folded, watching intently. A sly grin crept across her face as she noticed his distracted demeanor. "I bet he'll ask for tap water," she muttered to a co-worker, who avoided eye contact, visibly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, an older man seated nearby observed the scene. Lifting his wine glass, he offered a silent toast in Keanu's direction. Keanu acknowledged it with a faint smile and a nod. The evening was just beginning, but Hannah's growing animosity was becoming harder to ignore. After taking Keanu's order, she decided to make her feelings known. Rather than heading to the kitchen right away, she deliberately focused on serving other diners she deemed more deserving. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple at a central table, laughing a bit too loudly at a joke. Then she went out of her way to deliver a cocktail to a table outside her section. All the while, Keanu waited patiently. Every so often she walked briskly past his table, feigning busyness, her eyes darting away whenever he glanced her way. As time dragged on, one of the other guests who had been observing Hannah's behavior decided to intervene. The elderly man, with neatly combed white hair and dressed in a sharp navy suit, approached Keanu with a warm smile. "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I couldn't help noticing you've been overlooked," he said, his voice courteous but firm. Keanu returned the smile, his demeanor steady. "Good evening, it's no trouble at all," he replied softly. The older man chuckled, leaning in slightly to speak in a quieter tone. "You know, being treated like this can test one's patience. But keeping calm shows true strength." Before Keanu could respond, Hannah suddenly appeared, her polished voice cutting in. "Sir, can I assist you with something?" she asked, her tone overly polite but laced with authority. "I wouldn't want you disturbing our guest." The older man narrowed his eyes but remained composed. "Don't worry, miss. I was simply saying hello to this gentleman. It's not every day you meet someone so composed." Hannah sighed dramatically, gesturing toward his table. "Well then, perhaps you should return to your seat and enjoy your meal," she said with barely concealed impatience. Keanu, observing the exchange with calm scrutiny, nodded politely to the older man. "Thank you for stopping by," he said, his tone measured. "It was nice talking to you." The man gave a nod and returned to his table, but not before shooting one final disapproving glance at Hannah, who looked entirely unbothered. When Hannah eventually chose to serve Keanu's main course, she deliberately dragged her feet. First, she stopped by the kitchen to chat with the chefs, leaving the plate sitting under the heat lamp. Then she headed back to the dining room to tend to another table, completely ignoring the ready dish. When she finally brought it out, she placed it on Keanu's table with an abrupt motion. "Here's your order." "Enjoy," she said, her voice thick with sarcasm. "Oh, and if it doesn't suit your taste, let us know. We're happy to adjust it to something more within your budget." Keanu responded with the same calmness as before. "It looks great. Thank you." Hannah offered a sly smile and leaned in slightly, her voice just low enough for him to catch every word. "You sure? It's a pretty refined dish. Might be a bit much for someone who's not used to it." "I'm sure," Keanu said steadily. "Thanks for your concern." Annoyed by his composure, Hannah spun on her heel and walked away in haste. At the bar, she complained to a co-worker who was trying his best to tune her out. He's acting polite, but it's obvious he's out of his element, she sneered, placing an empty glass on the counter. Bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. Same story every time. They come here to feel important, but just end up embarrassing themselves. Her co-worker managed a strained smile, clearly uneasy. Maybe he just wants to eat dinner, Hannah. We should treat him like anyone else. She stared at him, incredulous. Like anyone else? Did you see his boots? He doesn't belong here. Honestly, if he can't handle it, he shouldn't have even come through the door. At another table, the couple who had been watching earlier whispered to each other. She's awful, the woman said, shaking her head. He's being so polite, and she keeps trying to humiliate him. Agreed, the man replied, his brow furrowed. It's disgusting. We should talk to the manager. Meanwhile, Keanu quietly finished his meal, glancing around and noticing the sympathetic looks from other diners. He didn't appear fazed in the slightest. When Hannah came back to clear the plate, her disdain was still evident. So, how was it? Did it live up to your expectations? She asked with a forced smile. Keanu met her gaze evenly and replied, It was excellent. Please let the chefs know they did a fantastic job. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise, frustrated that she couldn't provoke a single complaint. As she walked away, she muttered under her breath loud enough to be overheard. He might be smiling now, but let's see how he feels when the bill arrives. Keanu, seated calmly, observed her with a faint smile, his expression suggesting that the time to respond was nearing. Hannah, increasingly irritated by her failed attempts to rattle him, decided to up the ante. After serving him the coffee he'd ordered, she spoke loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. It's tough to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in here, she remarked to a co-worker, pointedly glancing at Keanu. The co-worker, clearly uncomfortable, tried to shift the conversation, but Hannah pressed on. That's why we have a reservations policy. This helps us steer clear of situations like this. Several nearby diners began to take notice, some scowling while others exchanged hushed comments. The couple observing the scene looked visibly upset. The woman placed a hand on her chest and murmured, This is disgraceful. She's trying to humiliate him in front of everyone. An older gentleman at a nearby table sipped his wine, watching with a critical expression. Under his breath, he muttered, This is getting out of hand. Keanu remained composed, seated calmly at his table as he glanced around the room, his face showing no sign of irritation. His composed demeanor seemed to unnerve Hannah even further, as she became acutely aware of the other patrons watching her. A stylishly dressed woman seated a couple of tables ahead whispered to her companion, He must be someone important to stay this calm. Anyone else would have left by now. Her companion gave Keanu a curious look and added, Or maybe he's just tougher than she realizes. Determined to provoke him, Hannah returned to Keanu's table and asked if he needed anything else, but her tone was far from professional. With a dramatically sarcastic smile, she said, I hope you're enjoying your time here. After all, it's always refreshing to have unique individuals around. It really adds to the atmosphere. Keanu looked at her steadily, his voice calm yet firm when he finally spoke. Unique. Could you clarify what you mean by that? Hannah gave a quick, nervous laugh, trying to keep her composure. Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our usual guests tend to have a more traditional profile. Seeing someone with your style here is, well, unexpected. The room fell silent. Conversations halted as diners turned their attention to the exchange. Hannah, enjoying the attention, seemed to believe she had control of the situation. Keanu held her gaze for a moment, his expression unwavering yet free of anger. After a brief pause, he said calmly, You're right. Maybe I should handle this differently. Hannah blinked, caught off guard, but before she could respond, the restaurant manager appeared. A middle-aged man with perfect posture and an air of authority. He immediately took in the tense atmosphere. When his eyes landed on Keanu, his demeanor shifted dramatically. He rushed over, completely bypassing Hannah. "Mr. Reeves!" the manager exclaimed with genuine respect in his voice. "I had no idea you were here today. Please, let me know how I can assist you." Hannah's face went pale, the color draining as the reality of the moment hit her. She looked between the manager and Keanu, utterly stunned. Keanu, now focused entirely on the manager, said calmly, but with weight in his tone, "Let's discuss how we treat people." The restaurant fell completely silent. All eyes were locked on Keanu's table, waiting to see what would unfold next. The manager of Lumiere, impeccably dressed and exuding authority, looked visibly rattled as he assessed the situation. Without sparing Hannah a glance, he addressed Keanu directly, leaning in slightly as a sign of respect. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply apologize for the oversight. I should have recognized you sooner. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Please let me know how I can make your experience better," he said, his tone full of respect. Hannah, who had felt completely in control just moments before, froze in place. Her mind raced as she tried to comprehend the situation. Asterisk, Mr. Reeves? Does he know him? What's going on here? Keanu gave the manager a faint smile. "Thank you, but there's no need to worry. I'm good. I'd just like to have a quick word with your staff, if that's all right." The manager's face immediately shifted to one of concern, sensing that something was wrong. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, whatever you need." He cast a sharp, disapproving glance at Hannah, who stood beside them looking pale and visibly unsettled. Hannah stammered, trying desperately to regain control. "I didn't know. I thought—" The manager interrupted her firmly. "Thought what, Hannah?" "That this guest, who also happens to be one of this restaurant's owners, didn't deserve the same respect as everyone else." His voice was low, but carried a tone so stern it seemed to drain what little color remained from her face. Hannah fumbled for an explanation. "He didn't say who he was, and he looked—" She faltered, realizing anything more would only make things worse. Keanu finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but carried a gravity that seemed to ripple through the room. "There's no reason for me to announce who I am to be treated with respect. Honestly, it shouldn't matter. Every single person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity." The dining room grew still, every patron riveted by the scene unfolding before them. Murmurs began spreading as diners whispered among themselves, stunned by the revelation that Keanu was one of the restaurant's owners. The couple who had been watching the interaction looked satisfied, while an older man seated nearby gave a subtle nod of approval. At another table, a man leaned in toward his wife and whispered, "I had a feeling there was something different about him." She nodded. "And look at how he's handling this, with so much grace. I hope she learned something from this." Other guests exchanged hushed remarks, some appearing regretful for not stepping in earlier. The atmosphere was tense, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity as everyone waited to see how the situation would conclude. The manager turned back to Hannah, his expression a mix of exasperation and restraint. "Hannah, I expect a full explanation of your behavior after your shift. For now, step away from this table and don't come back to it. I'll take it from here." Hannah opened her mouth as if to protest, but the manager's unwavering gaze shut her down. She turned abruptly and walked away, avoiding the stares of the surrounding diners. Keanu exhaled deeply and rose to his feet. His eyes swept across the room, meeting the gazes of the patrons who were all fixated on him. In a composed voice that carried quiet authority, he spoke. This restaurant was built on the idea that it would be a place where everyone feels welcome, no matter how they're dressed or where they're from. Today, that principle was not upheld. But I believe there's an opportunity here to learn and do better. The room remained silent, every word sinking in. The manager looked both uneasy and impressed by how Keanu had handled the situation. Keanu turned back to the manager. "I'd like to meet with the entire team after service tonight," he concluded. "There are some key matters we need to address." The manager gave a quick nod. "Consider it done, Mr. Reeves. Once again, I'm truly sorry for everything." Keanu returned to his seat as the dining room gradually settled, though the patrons kept murmuring about what had unfolded. The once bustling Lumiere dining room had fallen into complete silence. The staff stood together while Keanu Reeves remained at the center, his presence commanding attention. Worse, he scanned the room, locking eyes with each person, his gaze exuding a calm determination. "We all make mistakes," he began, his voice steady and clear. "But what really counts is how we respond to those mistakes. What happened today goes far beyond poor service. It highlighted the consequences of snap judgments, hidden prejudices, and a lack of understanding." He paused briefly, allowing his words to sink in. His eyes rested on Hannah, seated at the back. Tears filled her eyes as she lowered her gaze in shame. "Hannah," he said gently yet firmly, "I understand what happened today was an error, and errors can be corrected if there's a willingness to learn and put in the effort. What you choose to do next will define the person you are." Turning back to the team, his voice softened, though it retained a sense of purpose. In today's world, it's all too easy to judge someone based on appearances, what they wear, how they look, the car they drive, or the neighborhood they live in. But think about this. What happens when you choose to show kindness? When you make the effort to see beyond the surface and recognize someone's humanity? He took a step forward, slipping his hands into his pockets, his tone shifting to one of quiet introspection. Every one of us carries struggles no one else can see. The person who looks out of place might be enduring the hardest day of their life. The one who doesn't meet expectations for appearance might have achieved more than you'd ever imagine. Extending kindness, especially to those who seem undeserving, could be the act that changes everything. The room remained still as the staff absorbed his words. Some were visibly moved, while others stared down at the floor, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Hannah lifted her head, wiping away her tears. Her voice was soft, tinged with regret. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "I was so focused on the restaurant's image, on upholding standards, that I forgot what truly matters. I lost sight of the fact that everyone has value, no matter their appearance or background. I promise, Mr. Reeves, I'll do better." Keanu gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. "That's a promise you're making to yourself, Hannah, not to me. Real change starts from within, and if you ever need support, I'll be here." She nodded firmly, her expression a blend of relief and determination. "Kindness isn't about grand gestures," he continued. "It's about the little decisions we make every day. It's about treating everyone as if they matter, because they do. That's what shapes the character of a place and of a person." "Mr. Reeves, your message came through clearly. We'll make sure Lumiere embodies the vision you had in mind. Thank you for reminding us of that." Keanu gave a peaceful nod and a serene smile. As he exited the restaurant, the Beverly Hills streets shimmered under the glow of the city. He paused for a moment on the sidewalk, glancing back at Lumiere's entrance. His soft smile returned as he reflected. What had happened that night wasn't just about a restaurant or an incident with a customer. It was about creating environments where people feel recognized, valued, and respected. Keanu understood that even in difficult moments, there's a chance to inspire and create positive change. Walking along the illuminated streets, he thought about his words and the message he hoped others would carry forward from that night. If there was one takeaway, it would be this: in a world where you can choose to be anything, choose kindness. True strength isn't found in judging others, but in embracing them. And above all, remember, it's the small choices we make each day that shape not only the world around us, but also who we are as individuals. If this story touched your heart, there are plenty more waiting for you. Tap the screen to explore inspiring tales of hope, compassion, and resilience.